Have that question on my mind.
Okay, I'll call the regular meeting of the City Council for September 5th at 6:30 to order. Shall we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Berg.
Here.
Councilmember Hensley.
Here.
Councilmember Sharkey.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Schnapp. Here. Mayor Fig.
Here. So what we're going to do is a flag salute, and following the flag salute, Councilmember Berg will be giving the inspiration. So if you'd please rise. I
pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please have a seat.
Thank you for coming tonight. I thought we might take a moment to honor our 123rd Labor Day celebration that occurred yesterday. It's the first Monday in September, and it kind of represents the end of the summer and the lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer, and John Sharkey goes back into a coat and tie. So we know that it's Labor Day now, yes. The first Labor Day, nobody really knows, there were some Labor Day parades back in the 1800s. 1882, New York City sponsored the first actual Labor Day parade, but it wasn't a holiday or anything. The first state to actually recognize Labor Day and the workers who built this nation was in 1887, and that was Oregon. And the first state to recognize that. Over the next 7 years, another 30 states had Labor Day holidays, also the first Monday in September. So by 1894, Congress unanimously approved a federal holiday for Labor Day. And who was the president in 1894?
Grant?
Grover Cleveland, very good. You knew him, didn't you, John? Yes, okay.
He's the number of the mustache.
Yes, he did have a mustache.
There's a reason.
So the actual founder was never really discovered. However, Labor Day has been with us now for 123 years, and it is one of 10 federal holidays. That's another good trivia question you might want to look up. What are the 10 federal holidays as opposed to state, et cetera? Interesting question. I'm not going to ask that now, but thank you all very much for coming today.
Thanks, Will. At this point, we have a second meeting, and normally the Housing Authority is a fairly short agenda. So my thinking is that we ought to recess our current council meeting, call the Housing Authority to order, but before we do so, Madam Schnapp reminded me that we did have a closed session, and are there any announcements that we need to make as a result of that?
Mayor and Council, there are no reportable actions from tonight's closed session.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to recess the current City Council meeting, and we'll come back together after the conclusion of the Housing Authority. So with that, can we have a roll call for the Housing Authority?
Member Berg.
Here.
Member Brown. Member Hensley.
Here.
Member Sharkey.
Present.
Vice Chair Schnapp. Here. Chair Fig.
Here. We have an agenda. Do I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so approved. Brings us to our consent agenda, which is really just the minutes from previous meetings. Do I hear a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so approved. We're now at board member comments. Is there any comments that the board would like to make? This brings us then to open forum, so anybody in the audience that would like to address the Housing Authority on anything that isn't on the agenda, which means basically anything and everything, because we just only approved the minutes. So I don't have any speaker cards, but is there anybody that would like to address the Housing Authority? Okay. With that, I will conclude the, adjourn the Housing Authority meeting and now reconvene the City Council meeting where we left off at open forum, or did we approve the agenda already? I can't recall. Did we approve the agenda? Not yet.
I'll move to
Okay.
approve.
We just did the roll call.
Okay, so I got a motion from Mr. Sharkey. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we got 2 seconds. Okay. So all in favor of approving the agenda as presented?
Aye.
So approved. That brings us now to open forum for the City Council. So this is your opportunity to address the council on anything that isn't on the agenda. I do have 2 speaker cards. One is from John Edmondson regarding the museum, and I'm assuming this is an update on coming events. The other card I have is from Steve Gama, but it's hard for me to tell whether this is for open forum or something specific to the agenda. Open forum. Okay, so John, if you would like to approach us first.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Adamson. I'm lead director of volunteers at the Port Hueneme Museum, which is located at 220 Market Street. And I just want to brief you on a couple items we have coming up for September and some other special events we have ongoing. The first event I'd like to address is our scrapbook work class, which is going to be on Sunday, the 24th of September at 2 p.m. Basically, people bring in different little pieces of scrap, and we have a theme, the beach or something, so people will bring in little pictures of the beach or wherever they're at, and they kind of make a collage type of thing. So we're trying out new things, so we'll see how that works. I hope it does. The next item will be on September the 16th. It'll be at 11 a.m. and it'll be Dr. Frank Barajas, and he's going to be discussing the Mexican-American culture in the county here, and it'll be from the 60s to the 70s, and that's part of our distinguished speakers. So that might be kind of an interesting thing. Another thing here we've just started is we're going to have historical tours of the port, which we need you to have you come down and watch a video of the history of Port Hueneme. And if you really want to see how much commerce comes through this little town that we have here, you come down and see the video. We sign you up for the tour of the harbor. And you can definitely see that we're a mega giant here on the coast, which a lot of people don't know. It's kind of a quiet diamond in the rough, but it's a very important diamond. Our next item I want to address is we're going to try another class in rock painting. We're going to take little rocks they find on the beach or wherever, and we're going to have the adults or kids come in and they can paint little faces and things on the rocks and stuff, and that's going to be Sunday, October 1st at 12 p.m. So please come in and check us out here. One of our other items we got coming up, this is on the 21st of October, and this is going to be a Dr. Cynthia Harmon, and she's going to be talking about opportunities of the Hispanics in the education field. Okay? Okay, all right. One other thing to address, November 11th is going to be our Veterans Day celebration, and it's going to be right outside City Hall here from 8:30 to 9:30, 250 North Ventura Road in Port Hueneme. This is the second time, I guess, the city has ever had a Veterans Day celebration. I guess we haven't had one, ever. I don't know what happened, but anyway, you're welcome to come to that. And one last item is in the museum we have an old vault in the museum because it was a bank. Inside that vault, if anybody here served in the military in the local area, please bring us your picture and we'll put it in the vault, and there'll always be a place for your family members or yourself or whoever served in the service, and there'll be a picture in there depicting what branch of the service your family member served in and the time period they served in. And you can always go in there to the museum, and there will always be a place for that person in there. And generations can come in and see the picture and history of their family. So I just wanted to let you know about that. With that, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for the update.
If I
Okay.
could please have a question?
Oh, sure.
Yes. no
Those
problem.
tours of the port,
Yes,
how big can they be? How many people can go at a time?
about 12 people.
12 people, so like first come, first served, first 12 people would,
Right. Basically, you need to come to the museum and watch a video of the history of Port Hueneme, and then we schedule you for the next trip, which we have openings for, I think it's the 20th of October. And basically what you do is you come in, I believe that's Friday, you come in about 9ish or so in the morning, and they have a van comes down, picks you up, and takes you on the tour through the harbor. So there's nothing involving ocean, so somebody won't get seasick or something, but that little van will take you through the harbor and show you, just like I say, what an impact that the harbor has on our local community.
thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Great. Other comments, questions? Okay, thank you very much. So that brings us to Mr. Gama, and we all wish you well. I'm glad to see you're back in the saddle, so to speak, after having
about the
endured
saddle.
some surgery. So please.
Thank you, Mayor Fig, council member and staff. Every first Sunday of the month, I volunteer with John, and we had a really good time this past weekend. We had another volunteer come in, and we spent 3 hours entertaining people, cleaning up stuff, and just like to encourage anybody that hasn't been down there, come down there and hang out with John and the crew. It's really fun. So I am here today to talk about the 33rd Annual Coastal Cleanup Day. There are 27 sites in Ventura County. Laura Hernandez and I have completed the paperwork to have an official site here at Hueneme Beach, and it's going to be on September 16th from 9 to 12 p.m. Over the years, 1.4 million people have volunteered, and 23 million pounds of trash has been collected off California coastal beaches, primarily. More recently, they're moving into the creek areas and the dry creeks, and they're removing trash from there as well, which is really neat. We went to the leadership meeting last week, Laura and I, and one of the concepts that they're trying to get people to understand is most of the things we pick up on the beach are single-use items. In other words, they're designed for single use, and then somebody throws it on the ground instead of a trash can. So it kind of, it's ironic that the county gives us 500 plastic bags of empty bags for trash, and basically it's a single-use item that's going to be thrown away. So we would like anybody that has a bucket, bring a couple buckets, come down, help us out. We want to reduce our use of single-use stuff that ends up being in the landfill and do it in a more economic friendly way. So when we use buckets, we do better. I have 5 flyers, one for each of you, and at the risk of turning this event into a political thing, I'm inviting each and one of you to come help us. It's not just picking up trash. There's administrative work. We have to get waivers. We have over 150 people coming. There's some other things that don't involve picking up trash and stuff, but if any one of you don't have anything to do on September 16th, I'd greatly appreciate you helping us out. And you might be surprised to know that butts are the #1 item picked up off the beach in California. Cigarette butts, that is. Thank you.
So I have
Oh,
a question.
sure, please.
I believe the Filipino community is coming out to help. They always do. So
you, yeah.
that would be a big group. I know that they recruit all ages, and it's the 21 or 22 groups that exist here in Ventura County. They recruit from all over.
Right. Well, it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did want to talk about unofficial groups. And there are some large unofficial groups that don't sign up through the county that come out and participate. And they do it on their own. They bring their own barbecues, and they have a big event. But they also show up and contribute to the trash. And that's sometimes they don't get counted as participating. You know, if you participate with us, we have to use the waivers and do it according to the county. So there is some unofficial participants, and they do probably more so than the official participants. So that's a really good point. And I think it's called the Lacano Group, and we had a real good time with them last year. We hung out with them and had some fun. So I hope to see them out there again. But again,
They have incentives for the group.
yeah, they gave away $50 prizes for the most heaviest, the most unusual, the most disgusting. It was quite funny. But we'd love to see any and all of you out there on the 16th. Just come say hello. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. Okay, so that brings us to presentations, and the first is the Public Agency Retirement Services, PARS. Mr. Butler, are you to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, all three of these presentations tonight are really for information only, information education of the council. We'll be coming back on probably every single one with future recommendations, but especially on an agenda that isn't too heavy tonight, we wanted to give you a chance to get an extended presentation and ask some questions on the subject of possibly setting up a pension trust, pension or OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, and that's retiree health, basically in our case. The idea of beginning to set aside funds in a separate protected account, with those funds being invested by a professional firm, to help us be ready for the increase in our annual payments for pension and retiree health that we know will be coming down the road, especially after fiscal year 2021. So tonight we have Mitch Barker is the Executive Vice President of PARS, Public Agency Retirement Services. They've developed a pretty innovative, cutting-edge product in this area, and we wanted to have them present so you get a sense of what's available out there. A couple things I wanted to address right now. First of all, PARS has nothing to do with PERS as a separate, people get confused sometimes. PARS is a private agency, and Mitch will be explaining exactly who they are in just a minute. CalPERS, of course, is the public pension system that the city participates in and its employees benefit from. The other thing is, I heard there was a Ventura County Star article that hit this week, and I haven't seen it yet. I was interviewed by Arlene Martinez for the article. I've heard that one of the impressions that might have been left is that this is some kind of supplemental retirement benefit for the employees. PARS in the old days did have a supplemental retirement product that a lot of cities participated in, and it basically enhanced the benefits for, it was layered on top of CalPERS pension benefits and enhanced the overall pension benefit. That program is no longer even legal now in California after the PEPRA pension reform legislation back in 2012. So if that impression was left, I'll go back and read the article that Arlene put together. But this is not about giving employees additional pension benefits. This is about having the city be better prepared to deal with our existing pension liability that we know is there. We're not nearly as bad off as a lot of cities in terms of the dollar value of that liability, but it's still there even for us, and I think it's wise for us to start to think about how we can prepare for it. So with that, we will bring Mitch up, and I think he may have a co-presenter tonight, I'm not sure.
Mayor Fig, members of the council, staff. As mentioned, my name is Mitch Barker, Executive Vice President with PARS. It's a pleasure to be here.
You can put the mic closer to you.
Yes, sir. Our office is in Orange County, and glad to come up here and be in a beautiful area. Also joining me is Tori Milazzo. He's a Senior Portfolio Manager with Highmark Capital, a subsidiary of Union Bank, and they're the investment management arm of our partnership. So you're watching on your screens? Okay, very good. Page 3 will be the beginning of our presentation. There are 3 strategic partners that would bring you this program if you were to move forward. PARS, we're known as trust administrators. What the heck does that mean? We design these plans, we implement them, and then we administer them for the life of the plan. What do we really do? We do the record keeping. The technical term is sub-trust accounting. This is one trust, also called a multiple employer trust, meaning multiple agencies join this one trust, and we got to keep everybody separate. So your assets, your earnings, your liabilities all have to be kept apart, and we do that. That's called sub-trust accounting. We also make sure this thing stays compliant. As we know, GASB changes the rules, IRS changes the rules sometimes, state government changes the rules. Our job to legally make sure that your plan always stays compliant. And we monitor the contributions, the money you put in, and we process disbursements. You're eventually going to take disbursement someday. It could be sooner rather than later. Our job is to make sure you get the money out efficiently when you want it. We've been in business for 33 years, since 1984. We have over 250 agencies that have joined the trust that we're talking about today. And I'm going to share some of those with you. Our trustee is U.S. Bank. They're the fifth largest commercial bank in the U.S., and they're the largest 115 trustee in the nation. They do a great job. What's their job? Safeguard the money. This is a walled-off trust. It is not accessible by creditors. So if the city or the bank or us, anybody on our team that you see here, were to get into financial difficulty, the money is not accessible. It will be there for the benefit of your participants. That's an important concept of this trust arrangement. Highmark Capital, as mentioned, is the investment management arm, represented by Tori, and he'll go into more details. But they have a couple of very important things to me. One, they have an open architecture platform, which means they can choose any fund in the universe. There's about 14,000 out there. Good Lord, I'm glad I don't have that job, but they have a research department that culls those down into a working group of about 100 funds, and then they decide which 15 to 20 get on into your portfolio, knowing they've got a deep bench to go to if a fund is not doing well. That's called an open architecture platform. That's very important. And then they have an investment policy assistance. Your general fund is governed by a specific California government code. Can't invest in equities, better known as stocks. Our trust is governed by a different code section that you will invest in equities. The question becomes, what risk tolerance level do you feel comfortable with? And that's what Tori's job is, to take information that he learns and eventually make a recommendation. So at some point in time when that gets decided, if you adopt the program down the road, he's going to write a 5-page game plan on how much in stocks, bonds, and cash, what's the risk tolerance level, and then more details on that. We think that's very important because Tori won't be here forever, neither will I be. The council will change, but there'll be a surviving document that says what's the assumed rate of return and how are we going to achieve it. I live in Orange County, and I was here in Orange County in 1994 when we filed bankruptcy. And I knew some friends that were part of that, and it was a very tough time, as you can imagine. One of the key sections of that investment policy assistance is what's restricted, meaning what can I not invest in. Guess what? One of those things is derivatives, which the Orange County Treasurer was investing in. Also can't invest in raw land, can't invest in commodities, can't invest in precious metals. So those things that are risky are off the table. So you'll have some peace of mind knowing that they're going to stick to the fundamentals, blocking and tackling. And Tori will go into more details about that program. I wanted to share with you cities that have adopted our 115 Trust. Again, we've got over 250 agencies that have adopted. One of them not far away, City of Camarillo. Also Ocean View School District and Oxnard have adopted. But the partial client list I've put up in front of you is just the cities, so you can get some feel for who else has adopted this trust. And the idea is you can pre-fund either OPEB, which is the retiree medical benefit, or you can pre-fund pension, or you can pre-fund both. And these cities have adopted it for one or the other or both. You've got some very, very strong agencies up there. As I look forward, I see Brea, I see Fullerton, I see Glendale, Huntington Beach, Manhattan Beach, and so forth. So some very well-managed cities. So above you now on this next page is a graphic representation of our 115 Trust. 115 is simply a section of the Internal Revenue Code, and it's the best pre-funding vehicle our attorney firm could find. And the key is we always get IRS approval. We don't do anything unless the IRS has blessed it. So you have in front of you a IRS-approved, tax-exempt pre-funding vehicle. Pre-funding is a little bit of a technical word, and it simply means setting money aside in reserve. Only it's not inside your general fund, it's inside a trust, and it has advantages. Again, not accessible by creditors. 2, it's for an exclusive benefit only. And 3, you have the potential for a higher rate of return. And the other good thing is it offsets liabilities. We know unfunded liabilities are growing. We want to give you a trust with assets that can do something about that. So we have 2 accounting buckets in front of you. The idea is to put money in one or the other. Some agencies that have extra funds are pre-funding both. But OPEB is on the left. That one's been around a long time. GASB 45 came out in 2004. So every agency has been having to do valuations every 2 years to keep up with how much are my liabilities, and I'll show you your numbers in a second. And then pension is relatively new. This has only been in existence about 2 years, pension pre-funding. We were the pioneer of this program, and we're the leader. We've got 98 agencies that have adopted our trust just to set aside money for pension. Now, 2 ways you can use the money, which is down below. We can reimburse you, the agency, or we can send the money to the provider of your retiree medical benefits. On the pension side, again, we can reimburse you, the city, or we can send the money directly to CalPERS. So it comes out 2 different ways. You control that. The assets, as you see below, are accounted for separately. Why? Well, GASB dictates that. You got GASB 75 dictating OPEB, and you've got GASB 68 dictating pension. You can pre-fund one now and the other later. Total control by the city. You can choose different risk tolerance levels. OPEB, people have been fairly aggressive. They've chosen primarily a 60-40 strategy. 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Why? They're trying to achieve a fairly high assumed rate of return in their valuations. Pension, 2 years later, 98 clients later, moderately conservative has been the most common choice. You might say, well, what's the difference? Bottom line is people have been on a pretty bumpy ride with CalPERS on the pension side for returns. They're basically telling us we want much more conservative and we want a smoother ride, and we like 4 to 5%. We don't want you shooting for 7.5%. So it's been an interesting dynamic. You can access the funds at any time, but you have to think of them vertically. Money in the OPEB bucket can only be used for retiree medical. Money in the pension bucket can only be used for pension. So both, 1, that protects you, but 2, it helps you address unfunded liabilities. If you were to put assets in both buckets, they aggregate or add together for fee purposes. We have a multi-tiered fee schedule, so as the assets build, the fees go down. And the other key thing, bottom right there, we tried to build this program with as few barriers to entry as possible. We wanted to make it user-friendly. No cost to set up, no fees charged until assets put in the trust. So if you said, this is a great concept, the timing is right, but we have no money now and we don't know when we're going to get money, the answer is, no problem with us. You adopt when you want and you put money aside when you want. We wanted to make it that easy. Looking at your OPEB numbers, this is from the latest study. You have approximately $2.1 million in unfunded liability. So how do we lower those numbers? Well, when you put assets in the trust, you improve line 2, which improves line 3. And then there's interest earnings off of those assets, which is what Tori's job and Highmark's job is. That's a good thing. That improves line 2, which obviously lowers line 3. And then the third thing takes place, which is a little bit technical, but it's important to discuss. Your actuarial discount rate, which is what actuaries call it, you and I'm a layman, you might think the same way. Think of discount rate as assumed rate of return. You get 4% if you continue pay as you go. You get a higher assumed rate of return if you pre-fund and you put it in a trust. Why? You have a chance of earning a greater rate of return, so they're going to give you the possibility of a higher rate of return. Look at the footnote at the bottom. For every 1% increase in the discount rate, the unfunded liability is lowered by 10 to 12%. So if you said a 6% assumed rate of return seems doable, we like that risk tolerance level, well, that's a 2-point swing. 2 times 10 to 12 is a 20 to 24% lowering of the 2.1 million. Is that making some sense, hopefully? Good. The ARC also goes down, the annual required contribution, the next to last line. Think of that as your annual payment on the 30-year mortgage. So if you pre-fund, the ARC also goes down. And then your annual benefit payments, this is how much money you're actually expending on an annual basis. So again, this is OPEB only, this is not pension. So why pre-fund OPEB? Again, you get a greater rate of return actuarially, which lowers liabilities. Contributions into the trust are assets that offset liabilities on your financial statements. Some folks will say, I've got some money, but I've got it in a reserve fund inside my general fund. Why would I want to move it? Well, under GASB rules, you have to put it into a trust for it to be considered an asset offsetting an unfunded liability. That's why you want to put it into a trust. The fourth bullet point is an important one. I really like this one. GFOA considers pre-funding OPEB best practice. And I've never heard one council say, we don't do things best practice. All councils want to be doing things considered best practice. This is one of them. Credit rating agencies look very favorably at pre-funding. Why? You're setting money aside. Call it a savings account, call it a reserve account. The bottom line, it's improving your balance sheet. Therefore, you look stronger to rating agencies. And we've had at least 4, their credit rating went up after they pre-funded. Well, if your credit rating goes up, what comes down? Borrowing cost. That's a positive. So in our opinion, there's no downside to pre-funding OPEB other than market fluctuation. You will be in a diversified strategy, which means some percentage of stocks. What happens in the stock market? Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. But over a long time period, which is what you want to think of on the OPEB side, it's a good place to be. And again, Tori is going to address the returns so far. So that's OPEB. Any questions so far on OPEB? OPEB, again, standing for other post-employment benefits, other than what? Other than pension. What's other than pension? Retiree medical. All right, let's shift to pension. We call it our pension rate stabilization program. That was that second bucket on the right of our graphic slide. These are your numbers that we pulled off the CalPERS website. Rod, you said an interesting thing about PARS versus PERS. That's why I never call them PERS. I always say CalPERS.
Right.
So I also don't confuse myself at times. But these are your numbers. You've got $21.7 million unfunded liability. Your funded ratio is 76.8, which, by the way, deserve a pat on the back. Agencies want to be in the 70s somewhere, and you're at the upper end of the 70s. That's a positive. Do you want to take it to a higher level? Yes, you do, in my opinion. And here's the reason why. Your contribution rate this coming year, annually, $2.5 million for pension. It's going to go to $4.8 million in 5 years, which is an 88% increase. Why is it going to go up? CalPERS is lowering their discount rate, right? Again, that's that thing called the assumed rate of return. Why are they doing that? Because 1, pressure from the capital markets to do so. 2, they haven't been achieving 7.5. Well, last year they achieved 0.6, the year before that 2.4. This most recent year, they had a good year, 11.2. But historically over time, over 10 years for instance, it's under 7.5. So they're going to lower it. Well, the teeter-totter effect, if you have kids or grandkids, when you lower one end, the other end pops up. So if you lower the discount rate, what happens? Your contribution rate goes up and your unfunded liabilities go up. So our job is to help give you a fiscal tool in your toolbox to use to address that. All right, here's a couple of graphic slides. We've got it broken down into miscellaneous and safety. So your miscellaneous annual contribution is going to increase from 1.6 to 3 million, 85% increase. And your safety is going to go from 0.9 to 1.8 million, which rounding off wise, it's about 93% increase. So pretty dramatic numbers. Well, sales tax and property tax aren't increasing that fast, so where's the money coming from? In detail form, we've got funding scenarios from other cities I can share and have shared with Rod and staff before, and they can get into more details. But the point is, you want to start putting money aside now. It's sort of like either kids or grandkids that are going to college in 5 years. Our strong recommendation is start putting money aside now, so that if you're having tough budget times, paying for this higher number in 5 years, you have a source to go to help you make your number, and that's the key. Why pre-fund on pension? Number one, you get complete local control over these assets, meaning you decide how much you put in, when you put it in, how much you take out, when you take it out, and what's the risk tolerance level in your investment. Local control. What's the one restriction though? Can only be used for pension. So I just want to remind you of that key point. Number two, pension rate stabilization. Your general fund is earning around 1%. And we hear that from almost all agencies on average. Some a little more than 1, some under 1 if they're primarily in LAIF. As you'll see, the conservative strategy, the most conservative we offer, which has about 15% in stocks, over 10 years is earning 4%. So if you have the chance to potentially earn 4 times higher than your general fund for only a little bit of risk, this might be a wise thing to do. And again, I'll let Tori talk more about that. But it helps to stabilize things so that if in 5 years you're still earning 1% on the general fund and our trust is earning 4%, you're using a pot of money to help you stabilize that contribution rate. Number 3, rainy day fund. If, for instance, you put money in our trust for pension and you had an emergency situation that required your budget to use for other emergency purposes, you could take money out of our trust to help you pay your pension contribution to PERS, hence the term rainy day fund. So it's got a safety net, if you will. Lower cost. No one seems to know exactly what CalPERS is charging on the pension side. We know what our costs are. At the high end, they're 57 basis points, also known as 0.57%. And that's been a very attractive fee we've gotten feedback from on our clients. It addresses pension liabilities for GASB 68. Again, remember the teeter-totter effect. So when they lower that discount rate, the unfunded liabilities go up. We want our money in our trust to be usable to lower your unfunded liabilities at some point. Improved credit ratings, the same thing we talked about on the OPEB side, is the same thing on pension. All 3 rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, have come to us at trade shows and conferences and said, we really like this new program. This is helping agencies plan for the future, set money aside, and to be ready. Actuarially sound retirement system. Again, you're going to take your funded ratio perhaps to a new level, and that helps your sustainability over a long term. And then number 8, the last reason to do this is diversified investing. You can't diversify in your general fund. You have a code restriction that says you cannot invest in equities. You can invest in equities in our trust. The only question becomes, what risk tolerance level does the city feel comfortable with? And you control that. Any questions on pension? Okay, I'll wrap up at the end, but let me turn it over to Tori now to talk about the investment side.
Thanks, Mitch, and good evening, everyone. Just want to give you a little bit more background about our investment management firm, and then Mitch will conclude his comments. As he mentioned, we're Highmark Capital Management. We partner with PARS and U.S. Bank. We serve as a fiduciary investment manager for the 115 trusts. This page gives you a little bit of background about our firm. We've been managing money for clients for almost 100 years, since 1919. I'm one of about 50 investment professionals. I'm located here on the Central Coast. I live in Santa Barbara, and I work with agencies throughout Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo County. As you can see here, we manage a little, just a tad under $16 billion in client assets. More than a third of that are institutional assets, very similar to your agency's pension funds or other nonprofit endowments or corporate pension funds. I think one of the things that sets us apart is our ability to work directly with clients, and this slide speaks to that. We try to simplify the investment process to ensure that, as Mitch mentioned, we're developing an investment policy statement that meets the goals and risk tolerance for your municipality and ties that to our investment plan for these funds. Depending on those parameters, we may take more investment risk. We may have a more growth exposure, a capital appreciation portfolio you see there, or we may be more conservative. There on the right, you see the dedicated portfolio manager. It's really the portfolio manager's role to interact with the city to develop that investment policy statement based on the time horizon and risk tolerance and your investment return goals. We conduct annual on-site meetings, if not more frequently, and you have direct access at any time. This is a snapshot of the different types of portfolios that we build. As Mitch mentioned, we're an open architecture firm. We're doing the work of identifying the best investment managers to fill each of the buckets that build these portfolios. And as you can see, the most aggressive portfolios may be upwards of 85% equity or capital appreciation, and then the most conservative, only about 15% equity. Wanted to give you a snapshot of the returns we've experienced, and just some color for your benefit. Municipalities that are pre-funding pension liabilities, those liabilities are often seem to be more near-term in nature. Pension pre-funding, we may draw on those funds as soon as next year to help fill a budget gap. For pension pre-funding, most clients are choosing a conservative or moderately conservative strategy. You see in the past year, the moderately conservative up 6.67%. Over the past 5 years, about 5.4%. For OPEB liabilities, we find those OPEB liabilities to generally be longer term in nature. We're trying to build reserves for liabilities farther in the future, and so we're often recommending a higher growth potential portfolio, so a balanced or a capital appreciation portfolio. And you see the returns, in particular, the capital appreciation portfolios have been strong, very strong recently. I don't know if there are any questions about the investments or our investment process. I want to be sensitive to your time and turn it back to Mitch.
Yeah, oh boy. Anyway, we got a shower going on here. Fix that. Yeah. Anyway, so I understand your equity investments are in funds, or do you invest in individual equities?
We for some clients, we do use individual equities. Our firm has a individual equity research team. We do our own internal work. So for domestic large cap stocks, the domestic large cap core, we can do that with individual stocks. And the same for fixed income. Our core fixed income portfolios, we can do individual fixed income. So we do that work. We also use, depending on what the client would like, we do use index funds and mutual funds.
Yeah, because I mean that raises the issue, and this has come up before in other agencies with different kinds of investments. As a private investor, you can make investments that maybe a public agency wouldn't want to make, and you're not dealing with any sovereign funds or anything like that. But there are certain industries maybe we don't want to invest in, and if you're investing through equity funds, that sort of obviates that problem, because you're not looking at an individual company and saying, why is the city investing in this particular company? And so that would be my concern. But it seems like you're fairly well insulated from that.
There are two answers to that question. I would say that socially responsible investing and environmental and social and corporate governance concerns are a very high priority for both our municipal and private clients. So we're identifying funds that follow those types of guidelines. For our more customized portfolios, once again, in the large cap space, definitely it's easy to accomplish those goals. Outside of that large cap space, it just takes a little more work to make sure we're identifying the best managers. And then at the same time, you're balancing those socially responsible goals with your own duties as a fiduciary to earn the best rate of return that you can. So, I'm not sure if
Okay.
that answers your question.
Okay, and I don't know if this is for either one of you, but just to understand what this is, we are investing in a particular fund basically as an investment because we can get a better rate of return, and at the same time insulate ourselves somewhat from the vagaries of PERS contributions going up and down. Is that fair?
I think about it as a two-step process. The first step is that you elect to adopt the 115 trust, and that is whether it's for OPEB or pension, you're electing to set aside that money for the future liability. So that's the first step. And then the second component is choosing, based on what your risk and return parameters are, choosing how much growth you want to try to achieve.
Because, well, we have to set the money aside somewhere. It has to be somewhere. The question is, what's the best place to put it? And what you're telling us here today is that this fund may be a better investment than some other places we could put it.
We find that this tool is a very good way to maximize return on your excess reserves relative to maintaining them in the general fund. If they're maintained in the general fund, they're subject to the guidelines of those types of investments. Placing them in the 115 trust, designating them as assets to offset those future liabilities gives you better leeway and the opportunity to really conservatively improve the expected rate of return.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll turn it to Mitch for some.
Yeah. I have a question. So on the slides, there was one slide that you talked about in 5 years we will have an unfunded balance of, what is it, 21.7 million?
So I think that's your current unfunded liability as of the PARS June 30th, 2015 reporting. And the increase is really speaking to as CalPERS lowers their discount rates, lowers their expected rates of return, that's going to require an offsetting
More.
increased contribution.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I do. I have a couple. I'm not sure which one to direct it to. On that previous slide, there's some $72 million in assets that are available to fund our liability. Does the city have access to those PERS funds to reinvest in a different vehicle?
No. So 72 million are assets that already reside at PERS,
Right.
and they stay there.
And so we have no choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're subject to their one and only strategy, which is about 75% stocks, 25% bonds.
Okay. Are there any programs that you're aware of in which the city marries up with their employee groups to allow them to determine the level of risk return?
No.
Okay. Because that's always an issue here, and being from Orange County and the junk bond market and what, Camarillo went through the same exercise. It would be nice if we would allow our employees to be able to weigh in on the risk tolerance that they have in terms of what they might get at the end of the day in the way of a pension payback. Now, my next question is, if we got a $22 million liability, and if we take the moderate risk scenario, given actuary tables, points of likely retirement in our workforce, what would be the annual set-aside that we would have to achieve? That's prepayment, pre-fund.
Okay, so your annual contribution rate on the slide before you right now is 2.5 million, right? That's what you have to pay CalPERS annually.
Correct.
So the money you're setting aside is different than that, right? This is extra, this is reserve. So a what-if scenario that said if it was in moderate and moderate is achieving, whoops, maybe went too fast. So moderate over 5 years achieved 7.2%. We don't have the calculations on that.
There's a lot of math
Yeah.
in that.
Well, I understand. We just went through a budget adoption process, and one of the reasons I had some troubles with our budget is that we're not accounting for pre-funding of this unfunded liability. So my question is that, what is that appropriate target if the council wishes to revisit that question of pre-funding? What is an appropriate target?
Yeah, the actuaries, this is what they stake their life on. It's actuarial science, which is based on assumptions in making projections. So there's plenty of actuaries out there that could take the assumptions that you give, such as what you just said. How much are you going to put in? What's the risk tolerance level? And how much is going to be there in year 5?
Well, I'm looking to back in to that number based on our forecasts of retirement, when that money is going to be needed to be withdrawn. And so what, at the end of the day, given those schedules, what do we need to start setting aside based on assumptions of a moderate rate of return?
Any of the actuarial firms can do that, without question.
But you haven't done that. I
No.
was, okay.
We're not licensed to do that, so that's why we haven't done that. Because every cities, as you can imagine, their assumptions are all different. I can tell you one quick scenario, which is the city of Hillsborough. They wanted to stabilize to specific rates, and I think it was 22% for miscellaneous and like 48% for pension. So their goal was to set money aside, achieve a rate of return, and when in 5 years it's time to make their contributions to CalPERS, if they had not achieved those particular rates, they were going to draw from our trust to help them make it. So they did a specific study to come up with a number.
So is that kind of the next step here, if the city is interested in moving forward with this kind of program?
I think it gives you some additional answers to your questions. You wouldn't need the information to adopt our trust, but it would certainly fill in the picture. I think it's a good idea.
Okay. We have some pretty healthy reserves that are in our enterprise accounts. They're not general fund accounts. So can we take advantage of, say, for instance, lending our reserves from enterprise accounts to go to the general fund that could then be used to reinvest? Uh-oh. You're pointing to our city attorney. That isn't good.
You'd need some legal feedback on that. We're okay with the funds, but ultimately you'd need the blessing of.
The other thing we might want to do, and this was my intention when we are ready to come forward with a specific recommendation, is not go the loan route, but actually, because many of our employees who contribute to that overall
Work in
liability
those
work in those
enterprise
enterprise funds.
Correct.
Taking a portion of available funds from enterprise funds, not going crazy with it, but something defensible, and putting that toward our initial deposit. I haven't talked to Mitch in a couple of years to find out where PARS is at with that now, but that's something I think we definitely should look at, given our situation where we have 3 different enterprise funds that are all pretty healthy.
So what is your recommendation based on what we've heard this evening and some of the work,
Yeah, so-
groundwork you've already laid?
Right, so no action tonight from the council. My goal was to get a sense from the council as to whether there's at least some basic interest in moving forward with this trust concept. And if so, I would come back, work with Mitch, and make some specific recommendations to the council on dollar amounts, funding sources, all the specifics.
Thoughts, recommendations? I see a head shaking. Mr. Hensley? Okay.
You know, I think that this is a really good time to consider it because we know we're facing, you know, this mountain, and the rate of returns are then going to really help us out versus what we can do right now with funds just, you know, sitting in reserve. So I would be in favor of going forward with this.
What I like about it is some of the reasons I had struggled with the budget adoption is that we disclose in our CAPRA that we have a $22 million liability, but that doesn't solve the problem. And if we can start to incorporate that into our budget forecast, that this is a liability that we're going to start pre-funding based on certain assumptions as to level of risk return, and then all the actuary calculations that go into when are we going to need this money, how much, at what point in time. What I'm hearing here generally is let's move forward. Is that? Yes. Great.
Okay, we'll take
Thank
that.
you very much. It was very informative.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so that now brings us to item B, the 22 Network Fort Hueneme water story. Is this, well, this is Tim Gallagher, but are you introducing it for us, Mr. Hickox?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Fig, members of council and staff. Tonight I'm going to present to you a brief water story. This is something that we're going to present to our consumers to help them understand a little bit about our water system, what's involved with the water quality or the cost or the availability of water itself. So these slides will, let me grab the clicker. These slides will be brief in nature. The information that we provide will be simple in nature so that it's not to get too technical or too confusing for the consumer to understand. Like we said, what we want to do is we want to provide this to the customer. We'll be going to give you an overview of the story and tell you why and how we want to tell it. First slide here is we want to inform the customer that it is easy to understand water once you hear about it, once you take the time to learn about it. Overcoming some of the common beliefs is critical. Water delivery is complex, and water quality doesn't just happen by itself. It takes money, it takes effort, it takes pumping, and the costs are continuing to rise no matter what we do with the water system within our own treatment facility. We really need to educate them and get them to understand how water gets delivered. We'll use a combination of pictures and written text in our presentation to them. We'll visit with them to explain both the process in English and Spanish in our presentations. One of the slides that we'll incorporate is something that similar to this that will explain the aquifers. It's very important, being on a coastal region, that people know that seawater has an impact on groundwater, and that groundwater is expensive to pump from the ground, and that water quality is impacted by water that is naturally percolating through the ground. All of those factors are important to understand and consider when you want to know what's going on with your water, such as most recently a brown water complaint. It's important that people know that the difference between a deep aquifer and a shallow aquifer and why there's a difference between them. Real quickly, the shallow aquifers are subject to high nitrates due to the agricultural fields within our local area, and the deep aquifers are subject to high iron and manganese concentrations when the water levels subside and become low. So as you know, when we have to pump more water from the deep aquifers, then more iron and manganese concentrations are pumped upward and into the source. Surface water also plays an important part, and it's important that our consumer knows about where the other 10% of our water comes from, 10 to 20% on an average year. But we have to caution them that this water is expensive. There's a fine balance between groundwater and surface water. The quality of that water will vary. The cost of that water will vary. And it's all plays a part in the overall portfolio of our system. Not only do we have to be concerned with the quality and monitor it, but we also have to be concerned with the sources that it comes from and the cost that we pay for it. All of that will eventually trickle down to the end user. Sometimes we are forced to purchase expensive water due to operations beyond our control. There is no alternative. For example, when Procter & Gamble, when the line out by Procter & Gamble needed to be relocated by 101, we had to shut down that line for 3 weeks, and we're forced to take alternative supplies. That changes our operation beyond our control. But the customer didn't see that impact or didn't know the difference that it caused in the system. So it's important that they understand that there's operational challenges as well. The quality comes to play for us in our system. Not all treatment plants treat water equally. Some treatment plants can treat an abundance of constituents, and some treatment plants cannot. They might be limited to what they can do or perform, such as in our case with the membrane filters. Membranes remove the high salt content or the hardness of the water. They do little for other removal of constituents. In fact, some constituents, such as iron and manganese, may plug the filter membranes and make them inoperable, such is the case for us today. We will offer tours to the facility. We'll open up the doors as we did in the past when we were a demonstration facility. In fact, it's still our name today. We're still a demonstration facility, but the tours have obviously been reduced over the years. We will try to revamp that effort, open up the doors and let people come in and see and ask questions, and hopefully provide them an opportunity to become more involved in what the process is. We also have to inform them that conservation is now a way of life in California. Governor Brown recently signed the legislation that makes it a way of life. We now will be required to meet certain conservation requirements every year, which includes the wasteful use of water. So our efforts will be to get the word out about our Hueneme Gardens website, which allows our customers to go ahead and look and be interactive with a garden site to see what different plants would be acceptable to our region based on hydrologic values, evaporation, average rainfall, and those type of things. Also with the conservation, we might even develop a Garden of the Month recognition, something that will allow the participants to get involved in, and we can recognize the customers that are converting over their landscaping and making an effort to conserve the water. Part of the conservation is to share with them the city's ordinance. The city's ordinance number 698, the water waste ordinance, prohibits certain activities year-round, such as washing hard surfaces, running the sprinkler systems between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. And other water-saving measures are also required to be implemented year-round. It's important that the consumer knows that. It will help them with their water use, it will help us with our conservation efforts, and it will ultimately help ensure that we're using water more wisely. And finally, how will we do it is we'll be spreading the word. We've recently mailed out some pamphlets that went out in the bill stuffer, as a bill stuffer, the last couple of months. That information was specifically geared towards a water quality issue. Our information that we'll be sharing with our consumers will be more to their liking. It might be where we go to an HOA and offer a question and answer period. We'll be more specific with our operation. We'll get the word out to the folks that request our presence. We'll attend schools possibly. There's also maybe some public hearings that or public meetings that we could hold here at City Hall, or we're also looking at the Hueneme Gardens down at the museum and community garden area. So we're making attempts to get the word out, get the people involved, let them become more knowledgeable about our systems and why cost is what it is, why the water quality can change, and why it's important for them to understand what's involved to bring water to their tap. So that's the presentation for tonight. If there are any questions regarding this program that we're about to embark on, I'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
Questions of staff?
I have a question. Yeah, so what's the time frame? Thank you, Mr. Hickox, for a good presentation. What's the time frame that we're looking at to maybe cover the percentage that you want to cover here?
The schedule hasn't actually been determined yet. We're just getting started on what it is that the information that we want to get out there. We need to really develop a program or an approach to specific items. We need to gear it so that it is simplified and easy to understand. We could easily get technical and make it confusing and less interesting, to be honest with you. But our goal is to be just the opposite. We want to be proactive, so we'll get together with a schedule. I would say within the next 6 months, we'll be out and about in the community. The community garden will be up and running by then. More flyers will be developed, or different presentations will be offered. We'll reach out to the HOAs and let them know that we're available if they wish for us to attend and provide them some information.
Okay. Does this replace then that other pamphlet that we had used in the past to talk about our water situation? I know that in 2016, a few of the residents came up to tell us that maybe the verbiage we had used and some other things were inaccurate, or maybe weren't the best choice of words. Is this going to be in addition to that, or would that be replaced by this program here?
This information would be in addition.
In addition to that?
Correct.
Okay.
The document that you're referencing is a state requirement document.
Okay.
The information within it is limited. And so if there's specific words or language that you wish to get out to the community, the best way to do it is through either a bill stuffer or a newsletter or community notice or something like that, posting on the website, leaving the state required documentation aside. That way you meet the requirements of the law and you're still getting the information out. And then if you wish to provide more additional information on top of that, then these are the types of avenues for which to do that.
So maybe in this part of the outreach in the community, we can refer to that and just call it what it is, but this is where we're really educating the who, what, when, where, why, and how, because that other piece may not be. And so if we can continue to do that and then somehow sync up or be able to refer to the other, and maybe it's verbiage we can't change because it's a state mandated, but somehow I'd like for it to connect so it's not a disjointed message that we have. but it really works hand in glove. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
What's prompted the need for this kind of outreach? What's the impetus here?
Well, we know that there's been some concern with the water quality, specifically the brown water. Customers have received brown water in the past, and they've called in concerned about it. And it's a way for us to get this information out to them so that they have a better understanding, so that if another incident occurs in the future, they have an understanding of, one, what causes it, why it happens, what we can do about it, what we can't do about it, what's required, what should they do? What is it that we can provide them with information to help, them through that difficult time frame. And so that's what this information is about, is to assist our consumer.
Well, a factor that was not highlighted is there's a concern about cost. And Mayor Pro Tem Schnapp has indicated the need that we don't create a, mixed messaging to folks. And next regular meeting, we're going to have a preliminary review of a water cost rate study analysis, which will take a look at various options. It seems to me that we may be, getting out in front of some strategic planning that this city council is going to be handling regarding water supply, treatment, options to try to rein in our costs. So it would seem to me that this is material that may be a little premature, or maybe it's too late because maybe you started this effort 6-8 months ago. But now that we're coming up to a point where we're going to have some rate findings and decisions that this council is going to be making, perhaps it's best that we wait for that information to come forward, and then the council can decide how that should be folded into this equation.
That's certainly doable. This information was only being presented to show that we want to be proactive for the community. It's not to...
Yeah, but I think
go
we're missing the
after-
obvious. We have the highest rates of any municipal water provider, and we have the least incomes of any municipality. And so I think we're missing the obvious here. Let's don't try to sell something that really is of less importance to the people that are having to pay for the service. So that's just my opinion, that maybe this is and I like what our Mayor Pro Tem has said, that we don't want to send out messages that seem to go crosswise. And we're going to be in the middle of a rate discussion here shortly, so it seems to me that this kind of outreach ought to embody what comes from that discussion.
I agree very much with your presentation. I think it's been a very good one. I understand what the mayor here is saying, but educating the public about water is going to be a lifestyle now. It's going to be here forever. We could have started this 5 or 6 years ago, and I think the citizens would have been better served if we had done this, had the vision to be able to start educating everybody about the importance of water, where it comes from. I mean, most people don't even understand. It comes from the tap, and that's, they don't go much further than that. And so if we can start this program and really get the community involved in half of government, I think, is education, and educating the population, and we have to get this information out. I understand the expense of the water. It's for this community, it's very high, but perhaps by understanding where we get our water, how we treat our water, and the product that they're getting, again, we could have started this 6 years ago. So it's good job, Steve.
Yeah,
Great.
this was to encompass all of it, not to focus on one particular
It's a
component.
statewide issue, and
Right.
it starts right up in the Delta, and there's a lot to understand about that. Nobody really here in Hueneme might really understand, well, what's the Delta got to do with our waterway down here? That's 500 miles away, a lot. And it's an interesting topic. As you said, though, you can make it boring if you want to. But it is a very interesting, intriguing topic. So congratulations, keep it up, and produce more.
Thank you.
You know, there's one other thing. When we did a water rate study, that there was a special committee, Mr. Hickox, I know you were here during that time. There was a special, like, community committee that comprised, like, what, 3 or 4 different people selected?
Yeah, correct. There was a rate study committee that had 3 or 4 community citizens involved.
Right. So it wasn't just something that the council looked at, although Doug Breeze and I did serve on that, but there was more representation from the community to take a look at what was being studied. So, that might be something that we incorporate, although it's not part of this, but that might be something that we incorporate. So that could get more of input from our citizens, when we undertake that study. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is a kind of a nod, sort of letting staff proceed with the education program, and then we'll wait to hear the rate study. I guess it'll be in our next regular meeting. Is that what the schedule is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So unless there's any objections, we'll proceed on that basis. Okay, then.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so next up is California Consulting, a grant writing team. And Mr. Butler, is this yours?
Right, yes, thank you, Mayor.
Oh, I'm
Mayor?
sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there another party to be heard from? No, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, please.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, the council has indicated to us several times, including in the strategic action plan, that you would like staff to be more aggressive on grants, going out, identifying grants, applying for grants, hopefully obtaining them. And what we've done is taken some baby steps in that direction. With our current budget, we are working right now with California Consulting on a grant from, I think it's called Baseball Fund for Tomorrow, which
Fund for Tomorrow.
will potentially provide money for us to do upgrades at the Little League fields. And so this is kind of our first experiment working with California Consulting, and of course it's always a partnership between the city staff and California Consulting, but that grant is getting very close to being completed now, and Francine may be talking a little bit about that. This is, yes, the same Francine that you see at chamber events and other locales. She wears more hats than anyone I've seen, but she is actually an employee of California Consulting now. She's going to tell you a little bit about the company, about some of the opportunities that exist to work with them in different ways. And it's, again, just education information tonight. We may come back at a later time with some specific recommendations, but we wanted you to be aware of the fact that we're trying to move in this direction, and Francine's going to give us the rundown on it.
So thank you. So Steve, the owner of the company, was hoping to be here this evening, but he decided to spice things up this afternoon and break down in the middle of the 405 on his way over here. So
Oh, wow.
Wasn't quite going to make the council time. So nothing like Office Depot at the last minute to make it all happen. So California Consulting has been a company that has been around since 2004. Steve was an assemblyman of Fresno, and Fresno didn't exactly have a lot going on. Depending on who you ask, Fresno may still not have a lot going on. So he and his wife founded the company. They were really successful at obtaining grants, and once his term was over, he continued pursuing grants for various municipalities. 14 years later, they're still doing it. Currently, they have obtained over 812 grants successfully. They have various grant writers that do federal, state, and private grants, so they're not restricted to one kind. All they do is grants. They do nothing else. They only identify grants, go after grants, write grants, and depending on your agreement with them, they will either manage the grant post-award, so all of the reporting requirements, reports, and all of that fun stuff after the grant, or they will just obtain the grant for you, say, here you go, good luck, see you next time. It's up to you as the client. They have done over $1 billion in grants, just in California alone. They only work with California municipalities, and they only work with school districts, special districts, counties, and councils. They work with some nonprofits, and it's usually a nonprofit associated with the city. So like Oxnard has PAL, who handles after-school programs, all that kind of stuff. So that would be the kind of nonprofit we'd work with. The County of Ventura works with Mercy Clinic for pet services, for spay, neuter, low-cost vaccine. That would be someone we would work with, someone who's associated or affiliated with a municipality. So they have over 20 years' experience in obtaining, writing grants. They've had, as I said, over 812 successfully obtained grants, ranging anywhere from $150,000 to $2 million. As I stated before, federal, state, local, and nonprofit grants. So what they do is, they would come and they do an assessment with Ron. Find out what are the top 5 priorities the city needs. What are you looking to get? Police grants, transportation grants, what are you looking for? Based on all the information we need, during the assessment time, we would give Rod a list of grants. That's currently what's before you in the packets. This is this quarter's grants. They change every month, depending on what becomes open, what's closing, what had additional funding that they weren't able to surplus, and currently, there's a lot of federal grants that have not been distributed. They're actually extending deadlines currently on federal grants. They were not able to distribute all of those grants. Here's a fun little fact. The FBI has a $35 billion budget. They employ 43,000 people. The majority of their budget goes to grants, to work with municipalities, local police, sheriff, for whatever their target is that they're doing. So those are the kinds of things we research and go after. So then once the grants have been identified, we would notify you your probability of success. So if Rod came to us and said, well, our council wants a USDA grant because we want to start growing grass out here off of Hueneme Road, we would let you know that's probably not going to happen. You can go after the grant yourself, but we would advise you your success rate is pretty slim to none because you don't qualify under USDA, you're not a rural community, et cetera, et cetera. And we would advise you accordingly. You have a 70% chance of obtaining this, 80% chance, or you know what, you're going to walk in and walk right out with this, based on demographic, income of the community, communal need, et cetera, et cetera. So once we've done all that, we've assessed it every month, we send a report to Rod, letting him know what we've done, how many hours we've spent writing grants, working on the grants, or managing the grants. So once the grant has been obtained, we would manage it for you. So you don't have to calculate staff time or staff cost in managing the grant post-award. It's all part of the commitment. Now, some municipalities have departments that are able to obtain their own grants, and they would hire us for the bigger grants. We need you to go after a $5 million housing project grant, or the port was successful in obtaining a Tiger grant. That is a very intense grant. That is about a 60-hour grant of time minimum. So something like that would not be in the city's best interest to apply staff to. It would be to hire a professional. For cities that are a little smaller, like Hueneme, it's a little more bang for your buck to hire us than staff. When you calculate staff costs, even a part-time staff, the amount of time they have to spend researching grants, verifying the grants, verifying your ability to get the grant, post-grant work, and managing the grant, especially if it's a public works project, police grant, parks grant, or any kind of federal grant that has a lot of requirements. That's what would be all included in the service. So once we've done that, and we've contracted and we've done everything, there's a 30-day window of opportunity. So after 30 days of our service, if you say, you know what, things aren't quite working out how we thought we were, at that point, you simply can terminate the contract. You could say, you know what, this isn't working out. I don't think we should be together right now. I think we should take a little time apart. It's up to you. We're not here to pressure you. We're not here to to rub rubber to the road. We're just here to say, look, how can we help you be awesome? Because a lot of cities would love these grants, really need the grants, but don't have the ability to obtain. So this is our core team. Steve, who's the founder. Sherry, she does operations. We also have another gentleman we just brought on a week ago. Dan, he's handling Southern California. Sherry handles Northern California. Danielle, she oversees some of the grant writers. She sees the outreach team, and Tristan is our senior grant writer. He handles most of the federal grants, and he does a lot of the research on the grants. There they are. So these are some of the cities we have successfully obtained some grants for. Hermosa, the water grant, City of Upland, some fire grants. So they have a volunteer fire. So the SAFER grant we were able to obtain for them to stipend. City of Linwood, we were able to help them with some housing and some parks and recs. Also at the back of the pamphlet, the little packet I gave you, you could see a list of some of the grants we successfully obtained with their amounts and also the cities. San Fernando Valley, City of Patterson, we work a lot with the school district of Santa Paula. We've successfully obtained over $2 million for them in the 2 years that we've had them as a client. City of Waterford, Patterson, these have been clients that have continually renewed, so every year we renew the contract. It's up to them if they choose to renew, if it's in their budget. Questions, concerns?
Questions, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, over the years, the city has tried a couple different grant consultants with not very satisfactory results. I won't ask you why you'll be successful where nobody else was. But I'm interested in your pricing range, and that's the retainer. Is that a flat rate, or is that, are you?
So the monthly retainer is a flat rate. So it'd be $3,000 a month flat rate, and the average is about 10 to 12 grants we bring per month to ROD, based on some cities get more. So Fillmore, there's a lot more because they're rural, and they are lower income based.
Sure.
Cities like San Fernando Valley, there's a lot more park for them because of Balboa Park, things like that, but a lot of
But
program grants.
the rate wouldn't change with the size of the grant, or?
No, unless.
But if you're administering the grant, of course, you get the administration fees, which are built into the
No,
grant.
that doesn't work that way. It's a flat rate. So 3,000, we're managing, obtaining the whole thing. So the way that works is when there's fees associated, those fees are given to the city. So staff would be assigned to work with us on that. So let's say there's a housing grant, and the housing grant on the back end allows for a 15% administration. So that 15% would go to your housing authority, and that money is for them to use for staff to work with us in managing the grant, in the sense of obtaining housing records, pricing, the contract, whatever the project is. That's how that works. We cannot take the money out of the grant. That's why we have a flat rate fee.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
I have a couple questions. Thank you. Thanks for stepping in here. I'm looking at the website of the organization, California Consulting, so that was a really good question by Councilmember Shirkey. The other question I have is we don't know what we don't know yet, and so based on the organizations, the cities that you've worked in, are you going to supply information to us, or is it going to be a hit and miss on saying, hey, this is what we'd like for our parks, can you find something?
It works both ways. So some cities will come to us and say, you know what, we have this awesome piece of land, we want to make it into a walking trail or a dog park. Are there grants available for that? And we'll say, yes, in October, XYZ grant comes available. Or we come to Rod and say, here's this month's grants. He would then bring them to the council, or however you guys decide on how that conversation's going to happen. And then that decision is made. Okay, let's go after these 5 grants. These 5 grants we can use in the city. And we're not going to bring you a grant that's going to be a long shot. We're going to bring you high probability grants. The other question we get, well, is if you're working with the city of Salinas, how are you going to work for us? Well, the city of Salinas has a very different need than the city of Port Hueneme. Fillmore is very busy going after economic grants. They're rebuilding their downtown. They're not looking for program grants for libraries. They're not looking for park grants. They're not looking to redo sidewalks. They're looking to bring businesses and rebuild a museum. That is their focus. That's what the council is doing. Every city, we all have the same problems as far as unfunded liabilities, water, all the fun stuff a city has. But at the end of the day, the council has its agenda, what it wants to accomplish for its residents, and no two are the same. So even though a lot of cities may be going after certain things, you're not all gonna go for the same one, and you're all gonna go for different amounts. You may only need 100,000 for a park. LA may need 2 million for a park. So there's that too.
So I've written different grants in my lifetime, and part of the managing is actually the reporting.
Yes.
Is that part of the management when you talk
Yes.
about that?
It will be the reporting and post-award work. And it's working with the staff, whoever Rod says that staff member is, in obtaining the data we need for the reports. And then copies of those are given to Rod every month and as submitted.
And then the grants that you're going after, are there any that you have to pay back?
No, those are ones that, when you're sitting with us and you say, we don't do matching and we don't do any kind of, like iBank does a lot of, it's a grant and a loan. And you could say, we don't want to do those. We'll just take those right off the table. We only want the free money. All right, that's what we'll go after. You tell us what you want us to go after. So when we're compiling that list, that factor is in there. We're not just kind of all willy-nilly about it.
Okay, very
So when we
good.
met originally with Rod and Carmen had mentioned the need for, at Bubbling Springs. The backboard needed a little love, some new turf, irrigation, a fence, some chalk lines, little things like that for the baseball park. And to redo a park is about 50,000 just to start. That's not including, putting irrigation in. That's just fixing the grass, fixing the post, putting in the benches, rewiring the lights. Those are simple modifications, and that's 50,000 just to start.
So you could help us access some pots of money, because I will use the plural term here.
Yes.
To help us then shore up anything that we might not have enough in our working capital or working money every year to
Yes.
go after.
And a lot of smaller
fix.
cities use us for program grants. So there are senior programs, after-school programs, parks programs that they would like to administer that there's really no funding for. They may have volunteers or maybe a part-time staff that can do it, but they don't have the money for the program. So that's where we would come in as well. We would go through those programs, say, here's some of the activity programs as well.
So I could see where some of this work could actually go and fill in perhaps some of those spots or gaps that we might have in the strategic plan that we don't have funds for. I like the idea of working on identifying things that could help with programs, because we can sure beef up other activities and whatnot that we have for our community. And then finding those sources that, that wouldn't be paying back and wouldn't be a loan and wouldn't be matching. I think that would be really a nice addition to have for the city, especially with our size and what we're facing economically.
And a lot of cities go after grants for when you need to do a study. Caltrans does a lot of study grants. Cal Recycle does study grants. So also looking for those. Air quality boards do grants so you can do a study, because they know a city doesn't exactly have $250,000, $500,000 lying around to do a study that they're requiring.
Yeah, very good. All right, thank you.
More questions, anything?
Other questions?
No questions, but this is, again, a topic I would like to pursue and move forward on this. I'd be interested in learning the previous company and why it didn't work out very well, but we need to pursue more grants, and that's something that I've been thinking about for ever since the campaign, actually, because there are other government agencies very nearby that relies on grants quite a bit, and there's no reason why the city here can't benefit from these programs. I think the problem is a lot of these programs, we don't know what's available. And when we have at least somebody, it's worth a try for a little while to see what's out there and what we can get. So,
If I could add something, it might even be something that we broach with the Port Hueneme Water Agency and looking at some of those studies and all. So this could be a launching pad then to help some of our other organizations.
Yes.
There's
I was
water
gonna mention.
grants in this
Yeah.
quarter
Yeah.
cycle.
I think the important comment was, we don't know what we don't know.
We don't know what we, exactly.
There's a
What
lot
we
out
do know is that we want to turn lemon into lemonade.
Yes.
And this city, because of its demographics in the past, has been very successful in getting grants that, give special consideration to disadvantaged communities. Would your company be willing, because I see that a good number of the grants that you've achieved require some sort of a match, 20%, 50%, what have
Usually
you?
the larger ones, like there's one in here for the soccer field. So they're bringing in $500,000. So they expect you to put some skin in the game. If I'm bringing,
Guess what? I'm going to ask your company to put some skin in the game. What if we had a fee arrangement where you get half of what you're asking for, but you get the other half when you deliver the product?
so your city attorney will let you know it's illegal.
That's illegal?
In California.
How could that be? Okay, so these grants that require a match are legal, but not necessarily to contract for your services.
Sometimes they require soft match. So what a soft match is, an in-kind donation, the land, something else that's not monetary. So those are things we could be on the lookout for.
But you understand where I'm going?
Yes.
Is it, I think it's wonderful, we want to turn all stones to find whatever may be there, because we don't know.
Yes.
But at the same time, we want to incentivize the award.
So our incentive is repeat business and being able to add your name to the list. So believe me, there's an incentive, because this company doesn't do anything else. We don't go lobbying, we don't go advocating. We sit in dark closets and write grants for endless hours.
That's what it feels like sometimes. You
Yes.
sit in dark closets and write grants.
And just tediousness. Did I put the decimal here, and did I include this grant, and is this
I can recommend
financial?
an attorney to help you with your working.
Thank you. And it's, we get the paperwork 2 days before the grant is due. So believe me, we have quite the incentive to make the magic happen. So believe me, it's quite a thrill.
Okay, so is there a specific recommendation you're asking, authorization to proceed, or has there actually been a contract?
I think I'm hearing strong consensus to move forward with, I think what we would do is come back and bring the retainer agreement, which would be the $3,000 a month amount, and just maybe even put that on consent calendar for next time, unless there's a desire for further discussion. The thing that California Consulting does pretty well is tracking their performance. So you get a sense of how much are they bringing in relation to that retainer amount that you're paying.
Yeah, I like the return on investment on some of these communities. Can we write that into the contract?
We can set our own little goal later.
Okay, I guess what I'm hearing here is we'd like to at least move to the next step, because we want to explore all avenues.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the consensus?
Yes.
Okay.
And, I appreciate, Rod, for you bringing this to the table, because this is some of the outside of the box thinking that we really need to move Port Hueneme forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a precursor to the contract, is this contract terminable at will?
Yes.
Okay.
We can write that in there.
Let's do.
Okay, then, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
I think that Mr. Butler has his direction. That brings us to consent agenda. It's hard to believe that we're 2 hours or so into the meeting. We're just now getting to consent agenda. Do I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so approved. So that brings us now, Mr. Butler, you again. We're talking here about a temporary employment arrangement. Would you like to
Sure. Thank you, Mayor.
Take the lead.
Yes, council's aware that back on August 18th, former Deputy City Manager Carmen Nichols left us, went up to Goleta, and we have put together kind of a short-term and longer-term plan for responding to that departure. We are in recruitment officially as of today with Bill Avery, Avery and Associates, which everyone except probably Councilmember Berg knows and has worked with, because that was the firm that did the recruitment for the city manager position and all three of the executive team positions, police chief, finance director, and public works director. So Bill's and his folks are very familiar with Port Hueneme, some of the challenges we've had over the last few years, and that will address the issue of our long-term replacement for Carmen's vacancy, and that will be open to people inside the organization as well as outside of the organization. In the meantime, though, we got to figure out what do we do to address our need for someone to handle the responsibilities that Carmen was handling. So what I'm recommending is that we bring kind of in a John Baker style retired employee to fill that interim deputy city manager spot for a few months. The contract officially says 9 months. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near that long, but because of some of the regulations that CalPERS has now, you're better off shooting for the longer term in case something goes wrong with your recruitment, or there's just some kind of mishap that we're not anticipating right now. So the contract that's before you tonight goes from basically Monday, September 11th, through the 11th of the 11th of June, of 2017. The person I'm recommending is named Stephanie Mendenhall, former longtime city clerk, and then she branched out in her career, got into human resources, information technology, basically all of the functions that Carmen was overseeing. She retired as the director of administrative services in the city of Upland, and yes, she did work for me at one time, although I did not hire her there. She was there long before I got there. Back in 2015, she's been retired since then. I think she's going to be a good fit in terms of both her style, but also her skill base for what we need in that temporary position. And in the contract that's before you this evening, we actually had Lieber Cassidy and Whitmore, labor specialist law firm, help us in drafting the agreement and the resolution, because CalPERS is very much on top of these days retirees coming out of retirement, and you need to be careful you don't get yourself into trouble by not following their regulations. So we made sure that the language has been blessed by LCW and is consistent with CalPERS regulations. Stephanie's not here this evening, but the game plan would be to have her start on this coming Monday, September 11th, if the council approves the agreement this evening. And with that, I will open it up for any questions, and if not, would recommend approval of the agreement.
Questions or motions?
Move to approve the recommendation of staff.
I second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So approved. All right, Mr. Butler, you've got the next one, which is the REACH program.
Yes, so this is right smack out of the strategic action plan. One of the items that is called for in that plan is for us to really invest in upgrading the effectiveness of REACH, which is the nonprofit that was started by the city, is now spun off into its own 501c3 approved nonprofit organization with an independent board, although there are still city representatives on the board. Tonight we have just kind of an update on REACH, but specifically we wanted to recommend that the council appoint as a citizen resident representative Steve Kinney, who you have seen a lot lately in his role as economic development consultant. He is a longtime Port Hueneme resident, also has a lot of experience working with some of our local nonprofits in fundraising, and in fact has been a long-time member of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Oxnard and Port Hueneme. His seat on that board was just recently taken by our police chief, or filled by our police chief, Andrew Salinas. So Steve, effective just recently, is no longer Boys and Girls Club board member, but was on that board for many years and was very active in their fundraising efforts. That we provide some information to the council on some of the discussions that are going on at the REACH board level on ways to change their bylaws, REACH's bylaws. We've added that as an attachment to your report. We're not necessarily asking for council discussion on that tonight. We'll take any comments that you might have, but it's obviously something that the board, the REACH board, has to make some decisions on. And they include things like increasing the number of board members, expanding the representation base to different parts of the community that are not currently represented on the REACH board. So those are kind of the things that the board is grappling with, but they can't come to any decisions when they don't have a quorum at this point. Right now, my understanding is the only active members are Finance Director Al Burrell, who represents the city. He's got one of the city positions. Carmen Nichols, former Deputy City Manager, was another city representative. Obviously, that's vacant now. Rich Rollins, Rich is currently on the REACH board, but I think that is it as far as active members. There was another member that recently resigned, I think was moving out of the area or just made a decision that she could not continue to participate. So they can't do much of anything until we get one or more of those vacancies filled, and that's the reason for our recommendation on Mr. Kinney this evening. And let's see, Anna, don't panic in the back there. Was there anything you wanted to add on the subject of REACH? Anna's going to probably be one of our primary staff liaisons to REACH, and we're meeting with Rich Rollins tomorrow to get some of his feedback as one of the current active board members on where REACH stands and what some of his ideas are for improving it. Anything, Anna, that you wanted to add? Okay. So with that, we will recommend the council approve that appointment, and then any comments or thoughts that you have, we will take at this time, although again, we're not asking for action on these bylaw issues.
Questions?
So I do have, Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Sure.
Yeah, so I do have a question on the moving the board from 5 to 9. I know that sometimes with great angst, organizations do, and it doesn't work out to the best of what they could have done. So I just put caution out there. And then normally, as I've served on a number of nonprofits ever since I was younger, and then realizing that I've worked for nonprofits too, is that typically when you are looking to backfill positions on the board, you're looking at what functions could actually complement the organization. So if it's going to be, you need people who are really strong in fundraising and know a whole lot of people, those are the folks that you recruit. You just don't fill based on other organizations in the community. So those would be my two cautions on some of the adjustments that maybe are being put forth in terms of changing the bylaws. Thank you.
Other comments? Two, I'm assuming that with Mr. Kinney's appointment that there's no conflict in the fact that he has a contract with the city proper. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I got a little confused here where your revisions to the composition of the board says 5 members, but I tried like hell to add up to 5, but I got to 9. But more importantly is I thought we were trying the city to kind of step back, divest ourselves from this process, and yet we're kind of loading it up, 3 members associated with the city proper. You're not passing judgment this evening. You're not asking us to pass judgment. It just struck me as being that if we're looking to really make this a citizen-based organization, not a city-controlled or driven organization, that seems, pretty heavy.
Yeah, 3 out of 9.
Well, that's city council direct, but then you've got Parks and Recreation member, which is a body of the city. and then the same, well, yeah, Chamber and the Harbor District, no, they're independent. But you do have, so you have 4 actual city staff people or council members, and then a member of the Recreation Commission. So seems to me that's a little bit contrary to what the goal was. Now, I may be wrong, but that was what I thought the goal was, is to kind of divest the
move it
city
away
from
from-
that. Yeah. All right, so I think that please.
I don't think you're wrong. I think that was the intention when we discussed this last, was that we were not going to have as many staff members on this from the city, so that would be more community-wide, community-oriented. So if we sign off on this, are we signing off on this?
Well, I don't think we're signing off, is that correct?
Yeah,
We're just
no-
passing on comments.
Yeah, we'll definitely take those comments to the REACH board.
Thank
and
you.
Okay. All right, so at this point, all you're doing is asking for an appointment, and that would be
Yeah,
Mr.
council
Kinney.
appointment of Mr. Kinney.
Do I have a recommendation or a motion?
I move we appoint Steve Kinney to the REACH committee.
I've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. So approved. Now, that brings us to strategic plan update, also
Right.
yours.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I did not bring the whole matrix tonight. Just wanted to highlight a few things that are significant that have happened at recent council meetings. At the last council meeting, it was consent calendar items, but the council approved agreements with the Lou Edwards Group and with True North, and that those consulting firms relate to some very important work that is tied to the strategic action plan and our future financial health as a city. The agreement has been entered into with Bickmore, which was also on the consent calendar at your last meeting, and that relates directly to a strategic action plan program, which is to look at the city's insurance, risk management, liability, that whole range of functions and services. And Bickmore is a very good, nationally known firm, should do a good job for us in looking at our, what we have now with the JPIA, what else is out there, other pools, private options, just taking a look at that whole realm, and hopefully with the idea of saving some money while not sacrificing too much quality. We just talked about REACH, and REACH is mentioned a couple times in the strategic action plan, and we can really prioritize, I think now, hopefully with a quorum on the board, getting that group to move forward and to be not only more independent of the city, as we were just talking about, but just more productive, especially in the area of fundraising. They do have some funds still on deposit now. Not all the funds were used in the senior luncheon last year, so they've got a little bit of seed money to work with, but obviously we want to start developing some ongoing revenue for them. And then last but not least, the Citizens Advisory Committee, which I know is a long-awaited item. We had hoped to have it on the agenda for tonight. I still have not lost hope for September 18th, but we have been working on developing that proposal and bringing that forward to the council with not only the bylaws for how that committee will work, but with some specific ideas of what should be assigned to them as they get off the ground in this first 6 months or a year. So you can look forward to that coming very soon. And those are the ones I wanted to highlight. There's a whole range of items on the list that relate to long-term financial sustainability, and we're working one by one on each of those as well. Just trying to, it's still a lot of consultant selection, a lot of time, effort right now on scope of work. For example, the economic study of the Navy base. I had some questions that came in from some of the first consultants that we were talking to, and I think I now understand that we're talking about more of what would be called a fiscal impact study rather than an economic impact study. So how does the base impact the city from a revenue expenditure standpoint rather than what is the economic impact regionally? So I think we've got that clarified now, and that will help us in terms of finding a firm that can zero in on that and get some answers for us. So unless there are any questions on specific items right now, we're still obviously the loss of Mrs. Nichols will impact us for a short time, but we'll try to keep the progress going. The rest of the executive team has been very supportive in trying to get these moving forward. So.
Just that November 2018 is just a wink away. So,
That's true.
I mean, that's, I'm hoping that that'll be the focus here of a good share of the action plan is that we got to meet that target. Any questions? Okay, so that brings us to council members' reports, comments, requests, what have you. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I went to 7 different organizations, meetings, functions, and so on in the last 2 weeks, just to make sure there's a report that I do something around here. Also, somehow or another, our videography is not panning out. We don't have anybody on the board tonight. The last time that I tried to get a document out, it took me a week. It had to be downloaded. Nobody could get it off of the internet or the archives. I thought we were going to do something with our program here, but it seems like we got so far and kapoof, it stopped again. And we need definite high-quality sound if we're going to do something. I mean, if we just want to forget it and wipe it all out, then that's another story, but I don't think we want to go to that place again. So let's get things done right. That's kind of a critical thing. Thank you.
Mr. Butler, can you comment on any of that?
Sure, there definitely are some issues with Suite One Media, which is the service that hosts the video playback system. So sometimes there's audio inconsistencies with the audio. Sometimes people have trouble downloading, and it's not entirely clear whether that's on the user end, which it is sometimes, or whether that's on the host Suite One end. But I know for sure that Michelle and our IT folks are already researching, how do we need to go to a new platform to get the results that we want, or are there ways to improve the current platform? I'm not sure as far as, I know our former intern, Stephen, was the first couple of council meetings, was staffing the controls back there. If we can't, I will follow up with staff. If we can't find someone internally to take on that responsibility, we'll start looking to the Bob Allens of the world, or the students at Oxnard College, or someone from outside the organization that can be here consistently to do that.
John?
I do have one group that I joined on Labor Day. There was interfaith group that gathered at what was known as McGrath Family Farms on the 101, just between Oxnard and Camarillo, just on the edge of both, right? And Phil McGrath had an organic farm there. Well, he's leased the location to an interfaith group. Really kind of interesting the way it's working. But this interfaith group staffs the store that's open every day, and on Labor Day they hosted the second annual Interfaith Labor Day Harvest. And so we got out there. There were people from all faiths. We had a rabbi there, and B'nai, I think it's called, and then an imam from a Muslim center. Start us off, I got to introduce the national anthem, and there were probably a good 125 people gathered. And so we did different things that you would normally do on a farm. And so I was in the row that was pulling weeds out from lettuce that was growing, right? But we also did mulching, and folks sorted tomatoes and did all kinds of things on different property. It's quite large in terms of acreage. You see it from the distance and you might think, it's like a couple of acres. No, it's really larger than that. And so we were out there for the morning. So it's a good organization. It sounds like it's bridging some of the work that was needed, but also then the food that they're producing from this is actually then going back to the food shares of the world and the other food networks in the local community to help folks that may not be able to afford buying and having some fresh produce in their grocery bags. So it was a good group to be out and about with them yesterday. That's it.
Mr. Butler and I had an interesting meeting last week with Captain Yankee, which I thought was supposed to be a very intimate little gathering. It turned out he brought 10 people.
Yeah.
They had us outnumbered. But we did cover some interesting topics, and it was productive to the extent that we haven't had that kind of dialogue in many months. I'm going to suggest that Mayor Pro Tem Schnapp be included at our next meeting, if nothing else, to try to level the playing field. But I think that there is going to be ongoing discussions to follow up on some of the things that we talked about, and we need some continuity here in that dialogue. So I don't know if that's been set yet. I think we kind of left it open-ended,
Right.
and said, well, Captain, if we could do this on a monthly basis, that'd be great. But we kind of put it in their court. But I'm thinking that we need to make sure that this dialogue will continue beyond my involvement, and because there were some interesting topics that have promise. We'll see where it takes us. All right, with that, brings us to the continuation of open forum. I don't have any other cards, but now's your chance. Is there anybody who'd like to address us? Please.
Thank you. What I wanted to address you on is I noticed you were applying for these grants. And I'm not sure how the water system's working here with the city, but are we being dictated by the city of Oxnard as far as our water rates go?
Well, I'll give it my best shot if you're asking the question.
Okay,
Not the
yeah.
water as much as wastewater.
Okay.
Okay. Water indirectly because we do lease the city's treatment plant is on property in the city of Oxnard, and we lease that. And then there's a pipeline that comes from the spreading grounds from United Conservation to our plant. And so there's some financial interest the city of Oxnard has in that. But in terms of controlling or really impacting rates, it's more of the wastewater treatment facility.
I see. And because it affects both Hueneme and Oxnard, could we possibly, is there a possibility of piggybacking on a grant to support both cities in trying to improve?
Anything is possible.
Okay. Well, that's all I want
No,
to say.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And when we get into the grant writing, we also want to collaborate with our friends at the harbor because they have access to grant funds because of security issues. And the same would hold true with the Navy base. So there are opportunities that we can't go it on our own, and actually, if we collaborate, we probably have a better chance of getting something.
And also because of the Navy base being here, would we be able to to address the issue more on a federal level for a grant because we're helping the base with their water waste?
Like I said, there's any number of avenues that we could explore.
Okay, that's all.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's, I shouldn't have given the opportunity, but would you please fill out a speaker card and give it to the clerk when you're done?
I just wanted to tell the people in the council that the response to getting the new flags up at the beach was done in 3 weeks from the time it was brought to Rod's attention. So that was a great improvement over or more it was the last time, and thanks to the Public Works Department for getting that done. And also, another beach item, Rod and Anna Hanley have okayed that the lifeguards continue at the beach until the second week of October, which again was a big hassle a couple years ago. And with the warm weather, we're going to need it. And I think we need to look into the weather forecast beyond that point possibly, but thanks for the great work.
Excellent. Well, on that positive note, I'm going to adjourn our meeting until the 18th of September. Is that correct? Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was going to, I haven't talked to Ron about it at all. I was going to ask him if I know the letter. That was last week.
Even though you're not a lawyer, that's why I trust you.
It is, sir? Well, now's your big chance.
I put it in my calendar.
Here we are.
I'm with Freedom First Association.
Oh, okay, great, yeah. All right. Okay.
He spoke at one of those.
Well, thank you so much, yeah, yeah.
And they gave out the book and they only had a certain number. So we inquired about doing something. Community collaborative thing, what do we do? This looks like supports creative placemaking projects that help transform community. And so, like there was one community that did like this huge dinner. And it was like, it was massive, so it's like,
Nice of you.
oh, thanks. So, that was an idea. And there was another idea that happened after Katrina in New Orleans. And they took like a stencil and had people like chalk stencil and then fill in like the blank at the bottom. So I love New Orleans because, and then people would fill in. Or there was another one where there was a traveling board, and so it's big, it's artistic, it tracks like different generations, and it brings the community together. And so he pretty much said that there's like 25% of the people in the community that really like being here, but there's like